Good evening, my dear professor. This evening, I would like to present to you the following topic, which is the difference between dead and extinct languages. So, let us remember the following what our tutor Nestor in 2021 said. Language is not static or a stable phenomenon. Rather, it is a living organism. Language is an inherent ability to change. The language we speak now is different from what our forefathers spoke. Certain terms referred to as archaisms, which become outdated and cease to be used in daily speech, while new words emerge and enter the modern language are considered neologisms. Now, um, I would like to mention something important too. According to a relatively new field called lexicostatistics, which is a method of creating theories on the historical relationships between languages, dialects, and their changes. The American linguist Maurice Swadesh was the first person who established this methodology. Besides, terms from different languages are incorporated into global languages, and this is referred to as borrowings. And it is important because English is formed by different borrowings as well. As I mentioned before, the phenomenon of borrowing is very common in many languages, not only in English, but also in Spanish and other languages too. That depends on the cultural aspects also. We can easily find examples of this borrowing in our native language, which is Spanish, sometimes even without realizing that words are borrowed from other languages. In example, in this case, we have the word chatear, which comes from chat. And we say, vamos a chatear, let's go and chat. So it's very interesting. Now, let's focus now on language death and the definition. So, according to our tutor, Nesterenko in 2021, language death is an ongoing process or a continuous process in linguistics. A dead language is usually defined as language that some people still use, even if there are no native speakers left for some specific purposes. Here we have one example that is Latin. Latin is probably the most widely known dead language, and no one speaks that language as the everyday language anymore. But it is still being used or studied for academic purposes only. And plus, it teaches us a lot about our commonly spoken languages that are still in use, like the Romance languages, the Spanish or Italian or French or Portuguese. Okay, in this case, here we have the old Greek also, which is another dead language, another example of it. Now, it is important to mention another terminology too, which is the language shift. Language shift is basically when there is a transition from the minority language to the dominant language over generations. This is what our tutor also mentioned, and it is important to consider because the language in some occasions evolve and they have this transition, which is this language shift. Now, let's focus now on the meaning of extinct language. So, the extinct language is that the is a language that no longer exists, is extinct. And in linguistics terms, it is basically when the speakers or users disappear too. It's a language no one bothers to study at all. This can be the case for small locally spoken languages that die out, but it's also true of many ancient languages that we just don't have the information we need to learn, of course. In those cases, all we have are a few surviving fragments, and the rest is lost forever. In other words, as our tutor said, when the use of language decreases, resulting in no native living speakers, which means that the extinct languages are no longer in current use. Okay, let's focus on some examples of dead languages and also let's refer to some social conditions. The social conditions, for example, keeps the social conditions keep some dead languages kind of alive in the terms of the use of some specific contexts. Example, we have in religious purposes and or academic purposes. Latin is used in some medicine and biology aspects too. And and also for religious purposes, we have, for example, the Latin is used in the Vatican to read some fragments of some old books. And Old Greek too is also used in this case because of the Old Slavic that is used in some churches, for example. It's very, very interesting. Now, here we have the examples of the Latin, the Sanskrit, which is an ancient Indian language, and the liturgical language of Hinduism, as our tutor mentioned too. We have the Germanic languages family, which is another example of the language, that language, because we have different branches, and we understand why with the Scandinavian languages came and it came from the branch of Old Norse, which comes from the Germanic language family too. And we have the Old Ancient Greek too. Now, let's speak about the impact and the consequences of having a disappearing language. So, according to the Global Language Service website, for linguists, language death is a big deal, or a language or a disappearing language is a big deal. When a community loses its language, it often loses a great deal of its cultural identity at the same time. Although language loss may be voluntary or involuntary, it is often felt as a loss of social identity. For these reasons, among others, it is often very important to the community itself that its language survive. In other words, the impact of a disappearing language can define the loss of a culture, history of a community, diversity, even to know like the background of it, and other aspects that relate to the reasons why we speak the way we do it now at present with the language. Now, in conclusion, I would like just to mention the following. When languages die, often the history, traditions, and culture of the people who speak it can also die. I think that without a part of the knowledge, our understanding of the world is less complete for all of us. Thank you so much, Tutor, and here I would like to share with you the reference.